Welcome to a video from thedigital.com. This is a Korg Multi tutorial and we're going to be looking at motion sequencing on this video, and it's a beginner's guide to motion sequencing. I've done one where I've gone right into the complexities, but a few people have asked me to go right back to the beginning and do something really basic, so that's what I'm going to do. So the question was asked, can you make like a one-note arpeggiator with it? How do you put basic programming just from the front panel? So I'm going to cover some of those. I am using the editor. It's easy to visualize and I found it easier to use with the editor. But at first, the motion sequencer can look quite complicated. I'm going to clear that up. So the motion sequencer isn't your traditional kind of sequencer you find on something like a Korg Mini Logue, which I've got up there, where it sort of records notes and you play, like, and it can record real time or steps and you play the notes and that kind of thing. It's slightly different to that. It's about motion. It's recording motion, recording movements, maybe the movement of the filter, or maybe the movement of an LFO speed or something. So you can record movements into it, and then it will play back that synced. You can control the tempo, you can control the length of notes, that kind of thing. You can also control the pitch as well. So pitch is one component of it. You see here, if I go to the editor, you see we've got a lane for the timing, a lane for pitch, a lane for shape, and 4 sequence lanes. And they all can be used for different things. And once you get into it, you find that these lanes are really useful to do different tricks. The first thing I was asked is, can you kind of make a basic arpeggiator, which we can do. I'll record it on the front panel and we'll have a look at how it works, and especially in combination with the screen. So I go to motion sequencer, go to record. You can hear I've got a very basic, in fact, I've got an initial parameter, so I've got a very basic sound on there, which I will tweak to make it sound better. But for now, we'll just stick with that. So let's record something. We've got, we can record the pitch, or we can record those 4 lanes, which you can see on there. So let's record the pitch. So we want to do kind of an arpeggiator type thing. So here you can see the root note. So what root note is it going to be when you're recording? Because we're recording changes, probably that's the best way to think of it, rather than the actual note itself. So we're not doing it like in a sequencer where we're going play a C, then play an F, and play G and play C. We're saying we want this first note, and then we want the next note to be that many intervals up, say 5 or 7 or 12, and so on. So we'll stick with the C4 as our root note. Press enter, ready to record. So I want it to go. We'll stick with the key of C. C, G, C, G, C, G, C, and then we'll go back down. I've used 14 notes out of our 16 initial allotted sequence, so I'm going to put an extra one in there. Okay, now that length of 16 notes happens to be what the default is when you're recording, but you can change that, so you can have a 4-note sequence, an 8-note, or 13, 12, whatever you want. In fact, if you look here, you can see we can go to all this many steps, so there's a lot of steps you can get up to there, so you can see how we can go through those, but I've just done that first set. I'll concentrate on this 16 there. So I've keep those values in. You can see those values on here. So we've got -12, 5, 0. So -12 being an octave down, 5 being -5 being the C, and so on. So let's play that back now. So there you can hear our sequence. Now, that's it. That's your basic sequence in there. Now, if I start and play from a D, it should do the same thing, but using the D key. G. So whatever note I play, the first note will be 12, -12 of that. So if I play this G, it should play that G, and so on. And if I go right to the top, it does the same thing. So that's what I was saying. There's our basic synth sound. Now, actually, I'm going to show you some tricks now. let's just bring that length down. So I want it to repeat on those steps there. So I want it to end on that 14th step. Or if I could say, let's bring it down to an 8-note sequence like that. Very simple. And I'll show you what these other bits mean on here. So here we're going forwards. You can hear that going forwards, but we can actually go forwards and backwards, which is quite a nice effect from an arpeggiator. Or we can just go backwards. So there's that. Note on advance is a more advanced thing. I'll show you in a second, but that basically, well, let me show you this now. Note on advance means every time you press a note, it starts on the next number along. So without that on, our sequence always starts on the -12. If I put note on advance, it'll start on -12, and then when I press it again, it'll start on 5, and it'll start on 0. If I press it again, it should start on the 5, -5. And if I press it again, it should start on 0. It's a very handy feature, perhaps not to do with pitch, but to do other things as well. We can do a number of loops, so we could have it so it doesn't repeat at all, like that. Or we could do two repeat. And there's our start and end, which you saw me dragging these cursor points. You can manually change that as well. So let's put it back to infinite repeat so it's going to carry on. Now, some other things slightly more advanced. We can actually do some scaling to this. We can do it fit to a scale. So we can make it fit to C major. So let's set it to D minor. So you can hear that applying that. So that's without it. So you can hear it applying that scale. So I found that quite useful as well. Right, so the other thing that you would do in a sequencer is you would maybe change the notes. Maybe you want the first length to, you want a longer one, maybe you want a gap, and then you want a different length notes. Or maybe you want rest and things like that. So this is where the timing lane comes in. So you see at the timing lane, it's actually there. You can see it cycling through. Our timing lane is longer than the pitch lane that we've set up in terms of number of notes. So what's going to happen is they're not locked together. So they're not locked together. They're out of sync. But you can see it runs through. So to make this easier, I'm going to sync them together, but why I'm making it, you don't have to have them sync at all. And it actually can be quite useful. And I'll show you that in an example later. So let's just concentrate on these notes now. Added into this video, after I finished it, I realized there's something I missed. So I'm just insert it at this point. Here on the motion sequencer, I didn't show you the syncing and the master part. So I've got a little I've got an empty patch here. So I'm just going to record a little pitch sequence. So I'll record a pitch sequence. Okay, so there we go. So there we've got a little sequence in there. And if I play, say, a C and then the G, and I just slightly delay playing the G, you see they're not synced together. Or if I do an octave, it's probably easy to hear it. So they're not synced together. So what the sync all notes does is pull those and sync them together. So it just ties those together. So I quite often use that. So I just wanted to show you that. This master one here as well, what that does is if these lanes go out of sync, where because you don't have to have them all at different lengths, what the master does is force them back to the same length. So for example, this pitch one here, if I turn that off for a minute, and I'm going to go with, say, 13 steps here, and you see the note 1, for example, above it is on 16. So we've got 15 steps and 16 steps. So they're going to go out of sync. So now they're out of sync. But if I use the master, they'll always be in sync. Despite that one being longer than that one, it flicks them back, and the duration is controlled by here. So you can see it. So you can choose which note. So that way, they get reset at the end of the pattern. So I just wanted to add that in because it's quite important. So now you can change the length of the note. So I could have, instead of being 16, I could have it as an 8. So maybe I could have an 8, 16, 16, another 8. And maybe I want, let's go for 2 32s. So you can see, you can hear how that works. So that's some, again, some interesting effects. And what I was saying earlier about the length of it, you could, at the moment, that the C is on is always going to get an 8th length. These two here are always going to have that short length. But if I change that timing lane and made it go all the way to the end, see, it plays those length first and then those, and then it goes back to those. So they're not tied together. Anyway, let's go back to here. So you can hear how we've got different note lengths. So you can even go like a quarter note, and then maybe you could go to some 30 seconds for it to sort of catch up, and then go back to a longer note, and so on. Now, if you're thinking like a sequencer, like maybe like on the mod wave, you've got the fixed length, but you may have some rest in there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set these back to all the same lengths now, just to show you. And incidentally, I'm using copy and paste on here, Control C, and you can paste them in. You can do all this from the front panel as well. I've got a full video on front panel editing if you're curious on that. Okay, so there's our notes. So incidentally, doing it on the front screen there, you can see there's those separate steps on pitch. You can see the values are up on the screen there. So you can do it on the editor or on the screen. I've double clicked there on timing, and you can see I've got the timing, and you can see the step lengths. I've set them all as the same now. Let's have a look on the screen, some of the options on these timings. This probability one is a brilliant one, but I'll come back to that one because it makes it quite complicated, or interesting actually. You know, it's really useful, but I'll come back to that. Right, you've got each note has got 3 options. It could be a note, a rest, or a gate. So if I set it as a gate, that's all it does. Because it's a gate, it's just going to hold that note there. Incidentally, I mentioned about the note in advance before. If I had that set on, we get the gate, and the next time we know it's going to go to this next one, and let's go back to the gate again. So that so you see that gate, how that gate works. It's really and the note advance, they work really well. So I'm going to go back from a gate. I'm going to have that as a note. Let's go back to a 32. But I'm going to have this one set as a rest, and then that one as a rest, and then I'm going to have 2 rests, and then the note. So there you're creating more of the sort of synth type thing. So let's have a look at probability now. So the probability is the chance of the note happening. 100% means it's always going to play the note. So you can hear that end note there, always playing. So let me set that probability to nothing. You'll never hear that note. If I put 50%, I did hear it then. So it's not every time, and so on. So the higher the probability, the more chance of it playing. That are some really interesting effects you can do with that for creating sort of rhythmic, synchronized, sort of sequenced effects, but then to have some randomness in it that makes you can do some like Berlin School, Tangerine Dream type stuff like that. Really interesting stuff. So back to probability, full probability now. Now, something else I should mention when we look at timing. We've got two modes of timing. I've been working with the clock, doing timing mode. So yeah, we're in 32s or a whole note and so on. You can actually change it to time mode and it's actual time. So 2.5 milliseconds. So it's not clock synced. So that's useful if you may be using this to create an envelope type effect, because you can use these sequences to create envelopes, things like that. So that's something you can do. Again, it's more of an advanced feature as well. And here you can see you can have swing, and you can have the speed divided by the clock. So you can still lock to the clock, but you can have it divided down speed. Okay, so we've got a basic sequence there and a very boring synth sound. So let's try playing with that, and we'll have a look at some other things and these areas that are a bit complicated to understand at first, but once you get into them, they're really powerful. So I'm going to try a sound. I'm going to go to the envelope first, and I'm going to turn the sequencer off. So let's, there we've got a bit more of a synth type sound, a more interesting sound. Let's choose that to, there we got a nice square type sound. Let's turn the motion sequencer back on. It disappears. You can hear it at the beginning and then it completely disappears. So why is that? Well, it's because of our envelope. Our envelope is a short attack envelope, and it doesn't get re-triggered by the sequencer. It just plays when it gets triggered by you hitting the key. If you want it triggered by the sequencer, you can trigger it, and there's a few different ways of doing it. The first one I'll use is a step pulse. So this is like a clock from the step sequencer. So now every step pulse, which it gets from these timings, will trigger the envelope. So I'm just going to tweak that slightly and put that. So I'm going to put them all as 16s for now to create sort of a traditional sequence. I'm going to change all these to 8th now, just to give it that standard sort of familiar sequence. Okay, so now we've got our traditional sequence running. So we've got other things we can do. What else can we do with it? Well, one thing we could do is record some movement. So maybe the filter, let's cut off. Maybe we could do something like that. So we go to record, we choose our lane. I'm going to use A, we haven't touched it yet. So we play a note and it's ready to record. And now we can tell it which control we want to affect. So I'm going to control the cutoff. There you go, so that's recorded it. So you can see it there. Those are the parameters. And if we have a look at the filter, you can see it's mapped step sequence A to the filter cutoff. You can do that manually without recording it. I can say, let's have the resonance controlled by lane B, and I'm just going to put some values in there. Let's not go too crazy. Let's just put a few random values in there and say the resonance is controlled by sequence B. There we go. So we've now got two lanes controlling our sound. If we have a look here at the options, we've got exactly the same as we had earlier. We can do forwards, backwards. Again, these are independently, they're not tied to the length of this. You see, we're using the whole range. We could have one note up to 128 or whatever it is steps on there. So we're not tied in with that set. So the resonance doesn't have to be, say, at 14 when you play the first note of the sequence. We can have it, or when the sequence clocks round to the beginning, we can have it to be whatever we want. We can set the length of these independently, and that's what makes for really complex sounds. I'm going to set this to backwards and forward just to show you that. So the sequence lane is actually really, that sequence A is a long part, pitch part is a shorter part, but because we're going to play forward and backwards, it's going through them together like that. Right, so what else I want to show you? Okay, when you're hearing the filter, if you can see it on the screen there, you can see that it's smoothly moving to them. So it's not directly jumping to the value. It's not going -5, -16, -23, 100. It's transitioning through them. That's because we've got a linear transition. We can turn that off, and we'll have a straight cut between values. So you can see that's now moving straight through like that. So I've turned that off, but actually, if you go and look, you could say, oh, let's have individual. Each one of these can have its own transition type. So you can say be smooth for the first one, then switch for the next few, then smooth down to the next one. That's up to you. What I like to use is this, the shape lane. Here's the shape lane. You'll see we're all on at the moment. So it's stepping through them. But what we could say, the value, the transition between sequence A and sequence B, and so on, and between B and between part 1 and note 1 and note 2 and note 3 and so far. Here's the shape we're going to use. If I pick a triangle, it's going to go, the value will be high, then it's going to dip up and then down and then high again. So I'll show you that with a digital type sound to give you an idea what it is, but this shape lane is really useful as well. So let me switch this oscillator off for now. We're going to remove the, I'm just going to set the, is it 0 for now as well, so we're back to a clean sound. And then I'm going to put on a digital waveform, and I'm going to use the DW8000 wavetable. So this is the DW8000 synthesizer. It's got wavetables in it. Wavetables is where you can switch from one waveform to another, from say a sine wave to a sawtooth and to a vocal type waveform. All these little waveforms, and the DW8000 was one of those first synths that did that. I've got a whole video on this, and here you can have smooth transitions between them, and we can switch between the different layers, between the different wavetables. So I could use that, but these values I've already got entered here. Let's use sequence B. I'll say the position of this wavetable is controlled by sequence B. So you can see it there moving between them. That's on linear. If we turn it to digital off, we'll see it jump through. I'm going to turn the crossfade off as well so you can really hear it. And now if I use the shape lane, you'll see it move slightly different. I'm going to put saw up and maybe saw down like that. So you can see that shape being affected. So that's an interesting use of it for creating sort of rich sounds like that. Sequence A is not, we're not using it at the moment. I'm going to apply it to the pulse width position. And turn that on. So there's our triangle where we have our pulse width before. You can hear it being moved by that. And then we've got our digital wave as well. So I'm going to take the shape off that. So you can hear it gets some interesting sounds, and then it doesn't take much just to put a bit of chorus and a bit of stereo echo. And there you see it. And we're only, so I've just saved that one, but now I'm going to show you another example. So that's using the motion sequencer. That's using 4 layers, but I'm using 4 motion sequences. And if I turn it off to basic, just this one layer. I'm doing a little trick here. The envelope is triggered by sequence lane. So the envelope gets re-triggered by these peaks on here, and that's how you can hear that sort of double effect, the ratcheting type effect. I've got a full video on that as well, so please check that out. I didn't want to blow your mind with this one, but this just shows you what you can do. That is a single layer, 2 oscillators. If I bring those in, so that's it, 4 layers. And that's the kind of thing that you can do with motion sequencing. That particular sound is in one of my sound packs. I think this is in the ratcheting sequence. This one is in the volume 2 of my sets. So thanks so much for this video. If you've got any questions or bits of the motion sequence you want me to dive into further, or I didn't explain correctly and you want me to go through it again, please let me know. I love doing these tutorials, but I need your suggestions for what to do. So thanks so much for the video, and I'll see you on the next one.